The story goes that he had a dream. In the dream, someone appeared to him and told him to try this new formula for cooking meth.
Why, when you're looking at drugs in Australia, in particular the impact of methamphetamine, why you decided to track back to the source? Like quite often when research is done about the impact of drugs in a country or in a community, they look at the community.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and you see so many Australian news stories will say, oh, half a ton of methamphetamine was caught at the border in Sydney. The drugs originated from Asia, or they came from Thailand, and that's it. That's the end of the story.
Yeah,
like there's no interrogation beyond that. And actually, for me, this story found me the other way around. So I was, over the years, I've made a lot of films, done a lot of stories in different parts of the world, and I keep in touch with journalists and producers and stringers working in different places. And an old colleague and friend of mine was doing a story for one of the networks, one of the streamers. They wanted to film inside a meth lab in Myanmar, and the story kind of imploded when one of their criminal informants that was helping them get access into this meth lab got himself shot.
Yeah.
And she called me in a blind panic one morning in a car racing back for the Thai border because the guy that she'd been going to meet had been shot. Meanwhile, the whole production team are saying, well, this story's too hot for us. We're pulling out. So they were like, well, no way we're going to send our production crew and our expensive presenter into somewhere where people are getting shot. She got out to Thailand, but the story fell apart. And I thought, oh, well, that seems like too good a story to give up. So I kind of picked up the strings there a little bit, packed my bags, flew off to Myanmar. So what's all this about meth labs in Myanmar? And so I started really at that end of the story.
Right.
I started with, well, okay, so you've got all this methamphetamine being created in Myanmar. I guess the next question is, well, why? Where's it all going? And, hitherto I thought that most of Australia's methamphetamine came from China. So it was only when I started joining the dots and realized, well, hang on, this is a road. This is a road that joins two countries that really have no great shared history, or great cultural interest in each other. And yet you've got, $50 billion industry in a war-torn country in Southeast Asia that's fueling, a massive social drug epidemic that's going on, the other side of the region. That for me just became mind-blowing. But that's where I started. I started on the Myanmar side, and then kind of followed the route and ended up in Australia. And once I got into Australia, then I started asking questions about, well, why is it all coming here?
Yeah.
The book is kind of divided, as you've seen, into supply and demand, because I think you can look at the two things quite separately and then see how they link.
I'll say confused, but I have to accept it because you're not the only source, and the book's well researched. Is that Australia is the highest per capita user of methamphetamines in the world?
Yeah, I mean, there was. I guess it used to be the case, and you'll probably remember this back from your days in the police force. There used to be an awful lot of Australia's methamphetamine would have been produced within Australia.
Yeah,
and going back, there was a history back to the sort of 70s and 80s of Australians taking speed. So there was always a kind of appetite for amphetamines, and then that market got filled by the bikie gangs cooking out in the bush.
Yep.
We're into Breaking Bad territory there.
Yep.
But I think what happened was that the Australian government, the Australian Border Force, the AFP started to work out which chemicals were required to make all this stuff, and started to prohibit those. And you need 10 kilograms of chemicals or precursors to make 1 ton of meth. And the distributors within Australia worked out quite quickly, well, why take the risk of bringing in 10 tons of chemicals that we could get caught with, rather than just bring in 1 ton of meth? If we could just bring in the meth, it's 1/10 of the risk.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Economical sense.
Yeah,
risk.
and then on top of that, you've got the Asian gangs. The big gang, Sam Kaur, who stepped into the market and really took control of the market, who offered the bikie gangs with a guarantee. Well, if we send you a shipment of half a ton and it gets caught at the border, we'll just send you another one. The profit margins are so big that we'll just eat it. We'll send you another one, and it's like Amazon level guarantees.
The person that you referred to in the book, Dale, that you had your little home labs, little clandestine labs that the cops, when we found one, that'd be on the news. We found shut down another lab. But Dale invented and tell me if I'm wrong here, but he invented a new way of manufacturing the drug, and it was called the box lab. Do you want to talk us through that?
A fascinating story. This guy from Queensland, Dale Francis Drake, no real formal education, but an interest in chemistry. The story goes that he had a dream, and in the dream, someone appeared to him and told him to try this new formula for cooking meth. And what it did was it transformed the mechanism that people were using before that, which was quite a big, complicated industrial, sort of semi-industrial process that needed quite sophisticated kit, and meant that you could cook meth instead on a similar scale, but using a lot less kit and easier to acquire chemicals. And Dale put all this together, and it worked. And suddenly Dale became like the guy. Like all the bikie gangs was sending people up to go and get an education from Dale, and Dale was charging the bikie gangs, like a sort of private university, showing people how to cook meth. And his method, the so-called box lab, because it would all the kit you needed would fit into a single box. His box lab started to pop up in the United States. The FBI were finding Dale's box labs in Oregon and California and Idaho, and like a truly international export from Australia.
Well, at last someone's finally giving Dale some credit. So shout out.
Yeah,
to
well,
Dale.
he was kind of poor old Dale really was sort of written off in the press at the time as being a sort of I think they called him a hillbilly Satanist, and he was sort of dragged through the press. Because the Australian press are not very kind, I think, to methamphetamine users.
Yeah.
And quite vilified in the press. And I think once Dale's story came out, it was interpreted. It was given a very particular slant by the papers at the time. Certainly, no one was celebrating the invention and his genius, let's say.